So it raises the question, how do you navigate this tension and all these moments in which it feels like our faith and the culture of Greek life kind of collide, And this podcast was created to try to share our stories and wisdoms on how to navigate that,
When you think about Greek life, Christian faith might be the absolute last thing that comes to mind. But we not only believe that it's possible to be Greek and Christian, but also that it's the best way to experience Greek life and grow your faith. We have real, honest conversations about how to approach Greek life from a Christian perspective, including things like recruiting and pledging, drinking and drugs, sex and dating, leadership and philanthropy, and much more. This podcast is by Greeks and for Greeks. Our hosts and guests are all members of fraternities and sororities who collectively have decades worth of experience living out their faith in Greek life. Welcome to the Greek and Christian Podcast.
Welcome back to the Greek and Christian Podcast. And when I say welcome back, I really mean welcome back because it has been a while. My name is Sarah and I'm one of your hosts. And I'm going to tell you more about myself later. But for season 10, we have some new characters with us. So I thought before we jump in and tell you guys a little bit about what the Greek and Christian Podcast is going to look like this season, we could do a little bit of an introduction. We are going to start with John, who is our podcast veteran. He's been here since the beginning, never left, like consistent king.
But I'm like that weird fifth year guy that just doesn't leave.
He's still here.
He's still on the couch. He hasn't left. Oh, you're here again.
And as someone who actually did take half a fifth year, that's kind of mean. So
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's personal.
No worries. Okay, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I'd love for you to share, why did you go Greek? Why did you decide to join a fraternity when you're in school?
Yes. So I'm a Sigma Nu alumni from Clemson University. Go Tigers. I joined Greek life when I was a freshman, and I joined for none of the noble reasons like leadership development or philanthropy. To me, it was about big parties and good time, And when you join for those reasons, that's pretty much what you get. And I spent the first 2 years of school living the work hard, kind of play harder lifestyle, stereotypical kind of fraternity lifestyle. Long story short, somewhere in my sophomore year, I started getting burnout on the party scene. Through come to Jesus moments, some get real prayers with God, and a brief trip to jail, I decided I'm going to follow Jesus. And so that's a whole nother story. But I think in that realization, I came to realize that Jesus is the good life. Like everything that I had been looking for in the work hard, play harder lifestyle and hookup culture and parties and stuff like that, like all that satisfaction really was in Jesus. And that led me to starting an interfraternity Bible study when I was there, and then eventually led to me obviously working for Greek University, this ministry that we work with. And since then, I've been trying to help Greeks kind of find and follow Jesus and Greek life ever since. So there's my bio in a nutshell. There you go.
I'm desperately hoping we circle back to the jail story.
At some point.
No, that was such a good cliffhanger. Kristina, one of our new characters. Tell us about yourself.
So I'm Kristina. I was a Gamma Phi Beta from San Diego, University of San Diego. Go Toreros. And if you don't know what that is, you can look it up later. But I decided to go Greek day one of my freshman year. I knew I wanted to be Greek. My dad was a Pike. My mom was a Sigma Kappa from East Tennessee. And they had so many fun stories. They loved their time in the Greek system. And so I just grew up knowing I can't wait till I get to go through recruitment. And I did. And I knew from the beginning which chapter I wanted. I was one of those girls that zeroed in. I did not go in open-minded at all. And it was really great. I got the one I wanted, and it was a great experience from day one. I wasn't really following Jesus when I started college. I would have said I believed in God. Definitely was not irreligious. It wasn't a big part of my life. So going Greek became really central to my identity really early on. That's who I was. I was a sorority girl on campus.
A torero? Is that what you said?
Yeah, torero. It's a Mexican bullfighter.
That's kind of cool.
I know.
Okay, well, I would like to one up you on that one.
Okay.
I'm Sarah. I'm a Delta Gamma alumna from Indiana State University, and we are the sycamore trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Fighting
ferocious.
trees.
Yeah, name something any more intimidating than a sycamore tree, and you could find a lot of them. So
I just like that they were that specific. It wasn't
Yeah, a
just
sycamore.
tree, you know?
Uh,
They're like, wait a minute, pick a type.
I wish they would have fully committed to the bit and like our mascot was a literal tree, but they couldn't do it. Well, okay, the mascot is the sycamore tree, but the physical mascot suit is a woodland creature.
You know what? Bring back the tree.
No,
Let's
bring I
petition right now.
I
That'd be
actually
great.
couldn't agree more, Kristina. Like if you're gonna give that to us, we need to like actually lean into the bit. You know what I mean?
Seriously, what in the world?
I love the specificity of a sycamore tree, but the mascot is just a vague woodland creature. We don't really know what it is. It's
A
just
fairy.
It's he was a fairy.
Even worse.
It's a blue wolf.
Oh, well, they were like, we got to bring some ferociousness.
Yeah. And they went with a blue wolf.
Some-
So anyway, my story is different than your guys's. I grew up in a Christian home, super Christian, grew up going to like youth group, church on Sundays. Most of my circle of friends were people that I went to church with and church camps with and things like that. And when I got to school, what I knew I wanted to do was campus ministry. So a place where I could go and be a part of a Bible study. And like, I thought that that was going to be where I met all of my friends was through this campus ministry because that's what I was used to. And I showed up to one of them on a Thursday night at 9 p.m. and I was like one of 3 girls in the room, which is kind of crazy for campus ministry. And I went to join like a small group and they were like, yeah, we don't really like have one that makes sense for you right now. But like, what if you led one? And I was like, no, absolutely not. I won't be doing that. So my roommate at the time had signed up for Rush and she was like, I will pay your fee. You can get a free t-shirt. Just come with me. And maybe you'll meet some people and then you can drop out if you don't want to be a part of it. And I was like, okay. And I had full intentions of not going through with Rush at all and showed up to my first round of recruitment. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. You're going to put me in a room of a bunch of amazing women and just tell me to talk to them. I don't know who I thought I was, but I am a sorority woman at heart and I always have been. So that is why I went Greek. And then it was a whole journey from there, trying to figure out what is faith when you're in a sorority and things like that. So that's a story for another time, though.
Awesome.
So those are all of our podcast hosts for season 10 of the Greek and Christian podcast. And we're really excited to spend this season with you. John, would you give us some vision for where we're going for season 10 and tell us about what people can expect?
Sure. Yeah. I think in general for the Greek and Christian podcast, on the surface, it can seem like faith and fraternity and sorority life are mutually exclusive. If you put those two popular kind of stereotypes of Christian faith and Greek life together, it's oil and water. They don't really mix, which can lead people to question, like, is it really possible to be Greek and Christian? Is it really possible to live out your faith in this context and culture? I think there are aspects of, faith and Greek life that go hand in hand, things like philanthropy and leadership development and things like that. There's other aspects of Greek life that seem in tension with our faith and values. And so it raises the question, how do you navigate this tension and all these moments in which it feels like our faith and the culture of Greek life kind of collide? And this podcast was created to try to share our stories and wisdoms on how to navigate that. Between the three of us, I know we have decades worth of experience of living in Greek life, having been members of those organizations, but we've also worked with lots of students on lots of different campuses across the country, and we've heard lots of different stories. And it is our conviction that, yes, it is absolutely possible to be Greek and Christian, to be fully devoted to your faith and fully invested in your fraternity and sorority without compromising either one of those, your faith or your friendships. And so for this particular season, we're just kind of kicking it back off with the topic of how do you be Greek and Christian? Is it really possible? And if so, how do you work that out? Yeah, we're going to be exploring lots of different passages of Scripture. We're going to start out with one here today in the Gospel of Mark, a story about Jesus. But then we're going to be kind of zooming out to the whole biblical story from like Genesis to Revelation and painting a picture of what it looks like to live in but not of the culture around you, especially when it seems like that culture might not be in alignment with your faith. So
I would love to hear from everyone in this podcast room. You guys kind of shared how you decided to go Greek, why you decided to go Greek. You guys were both like out of the womb. I will be going Greek. I was like, what is going on here? And going to sorority. When would you say you first experienced the tension of being Greek and Christian? So, when was the first time in your life as a fraternity member or a sorority member where you were like, oh, these things, they conflict with each other, they don't go together so well? When was like the first time that that happened to you? Kristina, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I had a really a kind of a powerful experience my freshman year where God kind of woke me up to who he was. And it's a longer story, but it was incredible. I didn't really know that I could have a relationship with God. Stuff started to change in my life. I gave my life to Christ my freshman year in all the ways that I didn't know was possible. I experienced the Holy Spirit. Like all these amazing spiritual experiences were happening to me. And I just had a moment where I kind of felt like, wait, if I'm really serious about my faith, maybe I need to drop my sorority. I was kind of around this very vibrant Christian group on campus that was just, I mean, people were alive
Mm.
spiritually in every way, but no Greeks were coming to this thing. Like I would be like the only one. And I looked around and I think I felt it on both ends. I felt it from Christians when I would wear my letters because they'd be like, "Aren't you a Christian now?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. And I'm also a member of Gamma Phi Beta," And then so I felt that dissonance with Christian brothers and sisters of like, you should probably leave that old life behind. But then I loved my sorority so much. But then when I was in my sorority, I just felt like, oh, well, I don't really want to partake in the full Greek lifestyle the way I used to. And so it just for me, for a lot of times I was a little too bold with some of my sisters. I ran over them. I created problems sometimes. I wish I could go back and have some different conversations, but I feel like I was a little bit like sandwiched in between both worlds and not feeling like I was working out who I was. And that
Mm.
that was really tense. It was really hard. And there were so many times I felt like maybe it would just be easier to pick a side and just go all in on that side. And because I was falling in love with Jesus literally, I was like, maybe that just means I pick the like non-Greek side.
Yeah. I think I can also resonate with that sort of the pulling of the two sides and that sort of the tension between the Christian community, and campus ministries, and also Greek life. Yeah, for me, when I came back to school my junior year, I had kind of committed over that summer of just like, I'm going to really invest in my faith. I'm going to be serious about it. I'm going to follow Jesus. But I found myself on like Thursday nights, where everybody's starting the weekend early, and I would be in the fraternity hall and music is playing and people are starting to have drinks. The sorority girls are starting to come over. And I find myself kind of like sketchily sneaking out the back door of the hall, trying to avoid people because I don't want to explain that I'm going to one of the Christian gatherings on campus. Like I'm going to this worship gathering. And so I would walk over to this Christian ministry that had a worship gathering on Thursday nights, and I would walk in, and similar to like you're saying, Kristina, I'd be wearing my letters, and you'd kind of catch like odd glances of just like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, he's here. And then I would walk into the big auditorium. I mean, there's like over 1,000 people that used to come to this thing, and I would just take a seat kind of by myself or in the midst of the crowd. And, you'd sit there for the worship, speaker, prayer combo. The gathering would end, and then I would walk across campus. There was this big lawn on campus that was like 100 yards long, and I would walk across that from the Christian gathering into downtown to rejoin my fraternity brothers to get caught up on like what I missed, what happened. They're like, where were you? And it's like, doesn't matter. Like, catch me up. Um, that was kind of how I lived for a while, where my faith and my fraternity life were 100 yards of separation. And I tried to keep them separate, because it felt like the Christian friends that I had didn't really get my fraternity, and my fraternity brothers, I was afraid wouldn't really get my faith, and I was afraid that if I started talking about my faith or really kind of living it out publicly, that I would just make it weird. That it would kind of like I had spent this first 2 years developing all these friendships, and these are my people. Like, I love these guys. I love these girls that we hang out with, and I don't want to disrupt that. And I don't want to make it weird. And I had lots of fears of if I start talking about my faith or people start asking questions, are they going to judge me? Are they going to think that I'm judging them? And I think that's where it started out. It's just like a lot of fear of even like saying the name Jesus or talking about my faith, which I can tell more stories as we go of just like how that worked out. But that's where the first tension, kind of arose.
Mm. I liked what you said about not wanting to make it weird. I feel like I spent 4 years of college being like, okay, how can I do this and not make it weird? How can I not make my sisters feel awkward or make myself look weird? And then, like, my Christian friends, how do I not make it weird with them? I felt the tension of Greek and Christian literally on bid day after I accepted my bid because I had to tell my parents that I joined a sorority. And they had no idea that I was going through recruitment because I had no intention of actually accepting a bid. And I had to call them I literally remember it was Labor Day weekend. It was my dad's birthday. So, like, double whammy. And I had to call them and be like, hi, so I am in a sorority. Happy birthday, Dad. Also, can I have some money for dues? And my parents were so kind about it, but also really skeptical. I think they asked good questions and they were like, that's interesting. We had no idea that you were going to do this. I could definitely tell they were skeptical. I don't have anyone, well, at the time, I didn't think I had anyone in my family who had been Greek before. It turns out my grandma calls me on bid day. She's like, so glad you're a DG. I had the best time as a DG. I was like, okay.
Didn't
That
even
would
know
have
I was
helped
a
me
legacy.
during recruitment. No worries. So I immediately telling my parents that I was in a sorority felt like I already felt the tension of like, oh man, how are they going to take this as people who are following Jesus? What are they going to assume about me? What does this say about what I'm choosing? Am I choosing my faith? Am I choosing Greek life? So that was a pretty immediate thing. And then because I was already seriously following Jesus when I accepted my bid, it was like my whole new member period um, felt like there were so many moments where I was like, I should quit. I don't think that I can do both of this. My big was an amazing person, still an iconic friend of mine to this day. But I was like, I want my big to be proud of me as her little, but there's things that like I don't know that I can do and follow Jesus. Can I go to a fraternity party? Is that going to make me look bad? Like, there were so many things in my new member period that I went back and forth probably weekly. I'm going to quit. I'm going to stay. I'm going to quit. I'm going to stay. And luckily it got easier in like with the help of other people and mentors and things like that. Like, people helped me walk through that. It was immediate that I was like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not sure that I can do both of these things.
What were some of those moments out of curiosity? Like, what were some of the moments that are like, can I do this?
Yeah, they weren't even necessarily that big. Like, if you remember, I told you that all of my friends in high school were Christians. So even all of a sudden, I'm surrounded by all of these people who are not following Jesus, and I am, and all of these women that like I already love, I already want to get to know. The things we talk about when we're together are different than with my old friends, and
Yeah.
where we spend our time was different than with my old friends. And I remember going to a fraternity party. I was like, no one posts me on their social media. Like, no one can know that I'm here. If my mother sees a picture of this, she's going to lose her mind. Like, parties felt like that. Even things like trying to prioritize going to church on Sunday morning when all my sisters would get together to debrief Saturday night. There were things like that that I was like, I don't know how to do this right. I don't know how to choose. It was really hard at the beginning to figure out how they went together, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that tension feels really real. And I think the other tension for probably a lot of Greeks, and definitely was mine, is when you have been known as like a very fun partier. And then like I was fun, like I like
It's like,
I was
why is
there for
Kristina
it.
so lame now?
I
What
know.
happened?
And then and when I started really orienting my life around what Jesus wanted for me and how he wanted me to like, see my body as a temple and all these different things, it felt it felt like I was judging my friends even when I wasn't because of making different choices. And I
Yeah.
hated that feeling, you know? I just hated that they felt that way. I hated that they were like, gosh, you've changed and it's not for the better. You know, I'm like, but it is for the better. You know, I wanted to be like, no, this is like making me so much more full of joy and peace than I ever did. But I still wanted to like be present at the parties and be able to have fun. Yeah, it was hard when I needed to make changes, but still be there, like be different, but be there. And I still look back on those years and it was a mess. Like it was up and down. It was not a straight line. And that was hard as a new believer, you know, really trying to
Yeah.
navigate that tension of change, of transformation, and my friendships too. So
Yeah. I would definitely resonate with the sense of like going from the party lifestyle whenever, and your reputation is like, I love the reputation of just like, I'm one of the guys, you know, I just do what everybody else is doing. I just go with the flow. And it's just like, he's J-Mac, you know. The first moments I remember coming back my junior year and it was rush. Obviously I was like on the other end of the recruitment process. So we're at the fraternity house and we're hosting all of these potential recruits and everything. And I remember coming back in and saying, at least initially, like, I'm just not going to like have a drink at all. Because if I feel like I have one, I'm going to have more. And it's just going to lead me back to getting drunk again. And so initially I was just like, I'm not going to have any drink. But then, you know, I'm at this rush party at our house. One of my buddies, like, we're standing in there in a circle. And then all of a sudden other people walk away and it's just me and him. And he looks down and like, I'm not holding anything in my hand. There's no red Solo cup. There's no can. And he's like, dude, like, do you want a drink? And I'm like, nah, I'm cool. And he's like, did you get too drunk last night? And I was like, nah. Like, he's like, do you have a test tomorrow, like, that you have to study for later? And I was like, no. He's like, okay. And just like walks away confused. And I remember being back in my room after that, a rush event. And I was like, I can't say the name Jesus. I can't talk about my faith. I think there was so much fear because I had this reputation of being one of the guys and it was just easy. Nobody questions your lifestyle. Nobody questions like what you're doing or anything like that. But now that I've brought my faith into the mix of it and all of a sudden I'm making different lifestyle choices, now it's like a cause for question. Number one, it's conspicuous of like, why are you doing that? Or why are you not doing that? And I just didn't know how to say or talk about my faith in a way that didn't come off as like judging or weird or just mess it all up, you know? So
Thanks for sharing, guys. I hope that 3 different, but also like similar stories of coming to faith, knowing Jesus, joining a fraternity, joining a sorority, and experiencing this moment of, okay, literally how am I supposed to do both? And should I quit? Should I stay? Should I go? So it is probably true that for so many people who are listening to this, that is a part of their story too.
oh,
Which is
absolutely.
Yeah, which is the whole point. That's the whole point of why we're doing this. And it's the whole point of why we exist, is so that our listeners can hear this and be like, oh, yeah, that hits me in the heart. That makes so much sense. But that also raises the question. We have all alluded to it that, like, yes, there is another way to do it. It actually is possible to be Greek and Christian. Like, we're here today. We made it out alive. So how do we do that? Should we do it? Do we have to pick? Like, do we have to figure out how to make them work together? Should we quit? Should we totally leave our faith? Is there another way? And why should we do it? Is really the question that we're going to dive into this season. So John's going to kick us off by leading us through what that looks like.
yeah. So to answer that question on the table, is it possible to live out your faith in a culture that seems at times opposed to your faith? I think that's the core question that we're really talking about when we talk about being Greek and Christian is, can you live out your faith in a context, in a community, in a culture that at times it seems in opposition to your faith? Can you do that? And if so, how do you do that? You know, so to answer that question, we're going to, as I mentioned, take a look at a story of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. This comes in Mark 2, 13 through 17. And just to give a little context to drop you in, because we're in the midst of kind of an ongoing story, this is the beginning of Jesus's ministry. So no one really knows or knew who he was. When he first started out, he wasn't this like huge religious figure or historical figure or theological figure. Like at the time when Jesus first entered into the scene, he was just a seemingly another normal guy. He was just this guy from Nazareth who was a carpenter. But of course, as he started to go around and perform these miracles, healing people of incurable diseases and doing these inexplicable things, as you can imagine, he became an overnight celebrity. And all of a sudden, everyone is talking and asking, like, who is this Jesus guy? And what is he about? And what's he trying to do? And in the first 2 chapters of Mark, Jesus has been traveling around. He's been starting to, teach people like a Jewish rabbi would at this time, kind of positioning himself as a teacher. He's obviously doing these miracles that's gaining a ton of attention, and hundreds of people are gathering around him just to see what's he going to do. And he's also started to gather a, crew of people together, of disciples, which was a very typical thing in this culture for, Jewish rabbis or teachers to do, is that they would gather a small group of people that would be kind of their students, their mentees. It's kind of a mentor-mentee relationship where they would learn how to understand, the scriptures and the Bible and how to live their life. So Jesus is doing that. He's gathering this group of people. And I say all that because in this story that we're about to read, that's exactly what Jesus does. He is inviting a particular guy named Levi, also known as Matthew, the guy who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, to follow him. And so that's kind of where the story picks up in this little fishing town in Capernaum, which was in like northern Israel, right along the Sea of Galilee, as Jesus is like walking alongside the lake. That's where the scene picks up. And so, Sarah, do you want to read maybe just like the first couple of verses, and then we can just jump in and kind of talk about it?
So this is Mark 2, and I'm going to read 13 and 14. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus said to him. Levi got up and followed him.
There you go. Seems pretty simple on the surface, where you're like, okay, Jesus just calls this guy. When you put it back into that like cultural context, this is absolutely absurd and shocking. Like the people that would have been gathered around looking at Jesus would have been shocked by him calling Levi. And that's primarily because Levi is a tax collector. Number one thing you need to know about tax collectors is that in this culture, people hated tax collectors. They were like the Roman Empire kind of ruled Israel at this time. They ruled over it. And these tax collectors were like Roman IRS agents. They were kind of customs agents that would peppered along the outside of the Sea of Galilee, and they just collected taxes as people were coming in and out of the town. People hated them because they were notoriously corrupt. They wouldn't just charge people the required tax by the Romans. They would often overcharge them, and then they would pocket the difference. And so these were people who became very wealthy by unjust means at other people's expense, and there was nothing people could really do about it because they had the Roman military at their back. And so people just hated tax collectors. The other interesting thing is that Jesus is obviously positioning himself as kind of a Jewish rabbi, a teacher, and while it was normal for teachers, again, to call people to follow them, they typically only reserved their like invitations to the most qualified people, right? It was like the best Bible students growing up. It was the people who lived these moral lifestyles. It was the people that were known for their eloquent prayers and their devoted lifestyles and everything. And here you have Jesus, who is this like increasingly popular teacher, this miracle worker. And he has this whole crowd of people before him. And in the midst of this crowd, Jesus looks over at this notoriously corrupt, like political agent, this IRS agent, and invites him to follow him. You could only imagine like at the time that the crowd would have been shocked. There would have been like the gasps and the like, why? And the whispers of what's he doing? Like, why would he do that? And like, I think the mere fact that he even calls this guy sets the tension of what is Jesus doing? And like, who is he about? Then what does this say, about Jesus? But I'd be curious, like, if anything else stands out to y'all in the midst of that, of what Jesus is doing and how it lands.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. I love talking about this story with sorority fraternity students and seeing myself in the story because Levi He's like a socially powerful guy, but like morally suspect. Like he has all the connections and power, and yet he's using them in the wrong ways. He's using them in
Yeah.
like morally questionable ways. It's just really interesting to me. And then I also just really I love the point that you made, John. Like I always think about this actually when I think about the 12 disciples because Levi becomes one of the 12.
Yeah.
Like you have 12 spots on like your dodgeball team. You're like picking the team and you're like, all right, we got some fishermen. That's also kind of weird. And then you're like, how about the guy in the tax collector booth? I can't even imagine like what people would have thought. And yet I do think it is such a biblical necessity to talk about it because Jesus did pick him. In
Yeah.
fact, we know he goes on to write Matthew. This guy becomes not only like one of the major leaders, but a huge mouthpiece for the movement. And I just think it's so wild that he would pick this guy that no one likes and is so morally questionable, but also has all this power and connections.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Whenever I've read this with Greek students before, it's so crazy to think about being a person in the crowd and being there because, like, Jesus is a little celeb and he's, like, in your town and you wanna get your eyes on him or whatever. It's like if Jesus were to come onto campus, like, walk into your sorority, turn to the girl who has the worst reputation for the bad things that she's done, and Jesus is like, "Let's go have dinner." I would be like, "Hello?" It'd be quite a moment, so I think it is interesting to think about what the people around were thinking and just like the
Yeah.
questions that they had and what a sight it would have been for them to watch Jesus pick this person who they're like, of all of the people in this town right now, like, this is who you're going with? Really?
That
Yeah.
guy's the worst.
No, literally.
Yeah.
And he owes me money.
Yeah, yeah. And people could have been angry about it. It's also interesting from Jesus's like perspective. If you're starting a new movement, and everything you do and say is kind of scrutinized and questioned. You can kind of think about it at like campaign season, like when we have voting. People are launching political campaigns. Everything they do and say is kind of represents something and is scrutinized and says something about who they are. And Jesus is at the very front end of his ministry, and he chooses this guy. Like, that's not going to win you popularity points with the crowd. That's not a good political move. That's not a wise thing to do. And yet he does it. And then you have to think of it from actually Levi's perspective. That he's sitting here, he's just a person in the crowd listening to this new miracle worker. And Jesus looks at him out of all people and says, "Hey, will you follow me?" And the person who read the Gospel of Mark, like, gives us so little detail. It just says that, like, he got up, left everything, and followed Jesus. Like, it's just a normal thing, but that feels so loaded, because I think part of that is that who knows what he was thinking in the moment, the shock that he must have felt, the like humility, the honor that he felt. But that invitation represents a crossroads for him. And I think it begs the question for Levi of like, am I going to continue to live this lifestyle that I have been living? Which is a pretty good lifestyle. Like, it's pretty cush. Yes, it's questionable. You're going to live well off. It's going to be like a luxurious lifestyle. Am I going to continue living this lifestyle, or am I going to follow this guy and I'm going to change it? And in that moment, he chooses to leave the lifestyle. It says he left everything. He leaves the lifestyle of a tax collector, meaning he's like leaving his job. He's dropping his job. He's no longer going to, do these unjust things that he's been doing to people. He walks away from that. What's fascinating, though, is that he doesn't leave his friends. He leaves the lifestyle, but he doesn't leave his friends because in this very next scene, as the passage goes, Levi does the like most interesting thing that you possibly could. So, Sarah, if you want to pick up, you could read verse 15 and 16 and see how he responds.
While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?"
There you go. So again, Levi leaves the lifestyle. Now, in this moment, and especially if you put it back in Greek life, and Kristina, you kind of mentioned this, and I think this is often a question that comes up when, if you're in a fraternity or sorority, and then all of a sudden you start following Jesus, and you're like, I'm all in for faith. I want to follow Jesus with everything that I have. Should I drop my chapter? Like that's kind of a normal question. Like, should I remove myself from this culture or context that doesn't seem conducive to my faith? Is this going to help my faith, or is this going to be continually challenging me, in growing in my faith? And yet, when you think about it, it would be a normal thing for Levi to, like, when it says he left everything, that would include all those other tax collectors, that would include all the other misfits that he was hanging out with. And yet, in the very next scene, Levi does the exact opposite of that. He leaves the lifestyle. There's no question about that, but he does not leave his friends. In fact, he does the exact opposite, and he brings them all together at his house by throwing a huge party. It's like a super fratty thing to do. It's like a kind of heaven and hell in a mixer sort of thing going on. And he gets all of his tax collector friends. It says all the sinners were there, all the tax collectors and sinners, just like the people that were not following God, did not care about God's commandments or how to live their life. He brings all those people in, and then he brings all of Jesus and his disciples in too. He throws them all in the same place. In the Gospel of Luke, it says that he throws a great banquet, and so you could imagine there's music, there's dancing, there's food and drink, and that's how he responds, that he doesn't separate himself, that he doesn't leave his friends. He leaves the lifestyle, but he actually brings his friends and his faith together in this one moment.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that his first act as a disciple is like hospitality. It's like really cool. Like it could have been a lot of things. And there's something about Jesus that makes him feel like, if I'm accepted here, maybe like Jesus will be able to accept my friends, and be a part of their lives too. I've read this story so many times, and it is kind of like, why do they care so much that he's eating with them? And, one of the things about Middle Eastern culture this time is that eating with people was claiming them as family. And so you have this like kind of beautiful picture of these ragamuffin like group. Like, I don't know how many times they say tax collectors and sinners, but multiple times in like the one story. And it's just very clear this is not the who's who of society. And yet Jesus is there claiming them as family, and Levi is bringing Jesus into his family. And so, yeah, I like what you said. He leaves the lifestyle, but he doesn't leave the.
Anything stand out to you, Sarah?
Yeah, I liked what Kristina said about his first act as a follower of Jesus, is that he does what he knows how to do. He's like, I guess I'll like bring my new friend with my old friends, and we'll just like have a party. I love that. I love the picture of that in my head of Jesus with like this person on this side and this person on this side, and like across from him is one of the disciples, and to be a fly on the wall of what they would have talked about, like what were the disciples talking to the sinners about. And it's a cool picture.
Yeah, a wild guest list. It's almost like Levi's like the social chair. It's just like he does what he knows how to do. It's like, oh, well, there's this big moment. What should we do? We should just like throw a party. Let's get everybody together. He doesn't host a Bible study with these guys. Like, hey, let's get together and do a like reading of Torah together. He doesn't like, let's have a spiritual discussion group. It's just like, hey, let's get together and hang out and just enjoy one another's presence and everything. I think that's built into some of the hospitality. But not that there's anything wrong with a Bible study or anything. I think those are awesome things. It's just fascinating that this is where he starts with, and it's in the midst of this party, right? Where do you find Jesus? He's right in the middle of it, literally fraternizing with the very people. You see my dropping the fraternity. Literally hanging out with and talking with the very people that he should be avoiding according to the religious standards of that time. It's scandalous that the fact that he's in here. And it's scandalous because you can hear in the passage that the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious leaders at this time, this rubs them the wrong way. Here's this guy that is representing himself as like one of us. by outside standards, he's acting kind of like a Pharisee. He's teaching, he's calling people to follow him. And the Pharisees are like, well, this guy's kind of like one of us, but he's not associating with the people that he should be. He should be on the outside with us. But here he is on the inside with all these tax collectors and sinners. And so they turn and call this out. And I love that in the passage, if you actually look at the details, they don't talk to Jesus directly. They actually ask his disciples. They're like, we're not going to talk to that guy, but like, hey, you over here, come here a second. I got a question. It's like, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And the disciple doesn't even answer. It just says that Jesus straight up spoke up. So Jesus picks up that they're like calling out one of his buddies over here, and he just interjects and says, listen, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. I haven't come to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance, And I think it's the shocking truth that Jesus came for those not who seemingly followed God and had everything together and were living as they should be. Jesus straight up names that his target audience, the people he came for, the people he was wanting to speak to and be with, were those who recognized their need for God. They recognized that they didn't have it all together, that there was something they were missing. He didn't come for the spiritual healthy and the fit. He came for the sick and the spiritual misfits in the midst of it.
And I think that question of like, why is he eating with them? It's easy to like villainize the Pharisees and be like, gosh, they're the worst. But really,
Yeah.
I think that question is still one we ask now in different ways. Like, well, aren't they going to be a bad influence on you? Aren't they going to
Absolutely.
corrupt you? What message does it send that you spend your weekends with these types of people? It's asked different ways. And it's kind of like the fear of the Pharisees isn't necessarily that Jesus is going to sin, but that he's going to be like almost contaminated. It's like why they have all their
Right.
laws of just stay as far away, distance yourself as much as you can. That's how you become a godly person. And Jesus is just flipping it on its head. And it's like, actually, that's not how you become a godly person. It's not by just distancing yourself from the people that are the most broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like Jesus is like preaching a sermon to the Pharisees
No.
and telling them, hey, in theory, this is what this should look like. Like the Pharisees are literally watching him at a table with the tax collectors, with the sinners, with the disciples, like doing the act of eating with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it raises that question again, going back come full circle to the question that we raised at the beginning of like, how do you respond to a broken culture or a sinful culture or like a culture that doesn't necessarily align with your faith all the time? And I think we're calling out some different ways of how you respond to that, and Kristina, you mentioned the Pharisees, their response to that, and we should honor that because the intentions are good, right? That they were wanting to separate themselves. And that was how they responded to it. And so if we just zoom out a little bit, what I want to do is draw out like a few different ways that the people in this story respond to a broken culture. How are they responding to this party at this time? And so to start out with, I think there's two easy groups to point out is that there's the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the scribes, and then there's the tax collectors and the sinners, And so starting with the like religious leaders, how did they respond to this broken culture? They did so by separating themselves from it. Stay as far away from it as possible. Like, where do we see them at this party? They're on the outside looking in. They're not even going to step into this party and be even associated with these sinners and tax collectors. And their intention in doing so is to sort of preserve their morality, to preserve their righteousness, to stay close to God. And in doing so, they distance themselves from people who need God in the sinners. And sometimes I think we can do this in Greek life too. When you start following Jesus, or if you're following Jesus, you can, out of a desire to preserve your faith or just to avoid the temptation, I think we can distance ourselves from our brothers and sisters. We can end up running the risk of becoming what we call like a ghost brother or a ghost sister, somebody who appears on the composite, like they're there, they got their picture on there, they show up to chapter mandated events. They're not going to get fined, but they don't really hang out. They're at none of the social gatherings or the places where people are connecting and everything. So while I think people who do this enjoy a close connection with God, free of some of the temptations and the struggles of Greek life, they can end up running the risk of disconnecting themselves from people who need God, and we would call this this separating approach as alienating. You're alienating yourself from this broken culture. On the other hand, there's the tax collectors that are here at this party. And what do we see the tax collectors doing at this party? They're doing what everybody else does. They're just going with the flow. There is no resistance. They are lumped in with the sinners. That's why they're always together. If you read actually throughout the Gospels, it's always like tax collectors and sinners. And it's like the spiritual misfits and the ragamuffins. It's the riffraff. It's the people who aren't following God or believe in God. And while they have a close connection with those people and they may have friendships and everything, they run the risk of disconnecting themselves from God and the community. And the same is true for us in Greek life. Some of us, in our desire to fit in or the desire to find satisfaction outside of Jesus, end up just doing what the culture does, doing what everybody else does, and just going with the flow. If people are drinking, I'm drinking. If people are going to smoke, I'm going to smoke. If hookup culture, I'm going to follow hookup culture. And while I think people who do that enjoy a really close connection with their brothers and sisters, they have great friendships, they end up running the risk of becoming like a ghost Christian. An equally mythical creature as like a ghost brother or ghost sister, somebody who claims to be a Christian and claims to follow Jesus, but is never really seen living out their faith in any sort of practical way. And while they can enjoy close connections with their brothers and sisters, they run the risk of disconnecting themselves from God. And this approach is what we would call like assimilated. The tax collectors and the sinners have just assimilated into this broken culture. They just go with the flow. And I think that's often how we approach the question of how do you respond to a broken culture? Well, you just you either remove yourself from it, you either alienate yourself from it, you drop your chapter, you go join a Christian gathering on campus, you surround yourself with people who love Jesus, you go to Christian conferences, you do the Bible studies, all that kind of stuff, but you stay away from anything that would threaten your faith. Or it's just why fight it? Just go with the flow, or you just end up living sort of a dichotomized life, kind of like I did, where you just try to separate your faith and friends. The reality is that there is a third group of people at this party, and that's Jesus and his disciples. So here you have Jesus, who is a popular religious teacher. And in the culture, you would expect him to be on the outside of the party with the Pharisees and the scribes. But where do you see him? Right in the middle of the party. Right with everybody else, all those tax collectors and sinners. And yet we know from the larger story of Jesus that he lived a perfect lifestyle, that he did not just go with the flow. He was not doing what the tax collectors and sinners were doing. He was living this righteous and holy lifestyle. He enjoyed a very close connection with God, and yet he did so in very close proximity to people who need God. And this approach is what we would call incarnation. It's living in this broken culture, sinful culture, but it's not doing what the culture does. And so Jesus did not alienate. He certainly did not assimilate. What he did was incarnate. He enjoyed a close connection with God in close proximity to the people who needed God so that he could share God's love and healing with those people. And so here's the payoff. Here's, I think, if you're to sum it up, when Jesus calls Levi to follow him, it is neither to remain a tax collector nor become a Pharisee. It's to follow him in this third way. In other words, when Jesus calls Levi to follow him, it's not to remain assimilated. Jesus is very much don't keep living that lifestyle. That's death. Don't keep hurting other people. That's not good. He's very much against that, and he's calling him to leave it, and Levi does, but he's not calling him to do what the Pharisees do in terms of separating himself from all his old buddies. In the fact, he honors what Levi does and bringing them together by showing up to the party and joining him, right in the midst of it. And so I think that's the invitation for us, is that when we choose to follow Jesus, it is neither to remain assimilated. If you find yourself living that work hard, kind of play harder lifestyle like I did, or, if you're caught up in some of the like perfectionistic lifestyle of what can be like sorority life, it's not to continue living that lifestyle, to remain assimilated. And yet he's also not calling you to alienate. It's not a like direct given that he says, well, you should just drop your chapter now and you should come join this Christian community on campus, or you should just become a ghost brother or ghost sister, never go to parties again. Like, don't do that. Jesus is representing this very third way of living midst of the broken culture and yet living very differently. Why? To bring healing. Just like he says, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. And that's why he's there. But I'd be curious, in the midst of that spectrum, where would you have found yourselves in college? If you think back to it during your sorority days, where would you have found yourself in that spectrum from like, alienation to assimilation? Where would you fit in the midst of that?
I think I would have I found myself, at different times on different sides of that spectrum. I definitely can relate to that feeling of like, I need to withdraw. And I also can relate to that feeling of like, I need to blend in, and those are both really real. And I feel like even as you're talking, it's such a powerful story to me because for me, I did have an encounter where I realized Jesus actually loved my sorority sisters way more than me. And I feel like there's that hint of that in this passage of like, even though, he has this encounter with Levi doesn't go, oh yeah, well, I'm going to still be a tax collector after this. There's something about that encounter that he's like, I got to leave this behind. I can't keep ripping people off, like if I'm going to be with Jesus. But then I just love that there's this moment of Jesus, like his response to the Pharisees is basically like, I see their mess and I love them so much that I want to be with them in relationship with them. And I've had that moment where I felt frustrated by my chapter, or I felt like I don't fit in anymore, or I'm the God girl now instead of like someone that people perceive as cool. I think there are so many times that God's spirit was like, but I just love them so much that I want you to stay here. I want you to love them too. And so that's where I felt the calling of God. I mean, still 20 years later, working with Greeks, doing ministry with them, but that calling of like, I just love them so much. Come and be in the tension, not just because it's like the way I lived, but because it brings the most transformation and healing. And that's really, I don't know. I just love that about this story.
Yeah.
I think I feel similarly, Kristina. I look back on my 4.5 years of college and think about like I could have literally put myself all over that spectrum at different points in like my sorority career. Like I was so assimilated when I turned 21, and all of a sudden drinking was something I could do as a 21-year-old, and made not so great decisions there, and was super alienated when I first joined my chapter and thought that if I am seen at a fraternity party, like that's it. That's the end. So, but I do remember someone sitting down and explaining this to me partway through my freshman year. And I literally remember where I was sitting on campus when my mentor took me through this idea. And I was like, that makes so much sense. It was the first time that I like put words to what literally felt like physical tension in my body of how do you do both of these things? And also like, how do you do it where it's not like a ton of work? And it was so it felt like it changed the trajectory of my college career when someone was like, "No, literally you can do both and you can do it well, and it can still be fun, and it can still be
Absolutely. Yeah.
fulfilling, and it can still like you can still have deep relationships with your sisters and honor your faith." It was like the moment where I was like, "Oh, I will stay and I will do this, and it's gonna be so much fun, even though I'm not doing it the same way as everyone else."
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point to say, when we talk about being Greek and Christian, what we're not talking about is like a watered down version of either of those things. I mean, that can sometimes come off as just like, oh, Greek and Christian. So on the Christian side, what you're really talking about is watering down your faith, or you're just like that Christian that goes out and get drunk on the weekends and does whatever, and then shows up to church on Sunday. That's not it, and it's also not the like, you say you're in Greek life, but like you never go to anything. You're always going to small groups or church or stuff like that. Jesus is evidence that you can be fully both, that you can be fully invested in these friendships and relationships with people who don't follow God and don't know God, and fully invested in your relationship with God without compromising one or the other. But that can be, there's tension in that. It's not easy to do, but I think that's part of the invitation.
John, if when people find themselves identifying with one side or the other, what would you say are some ways? If
Yeah.
I'm listening to this and I'm like, you know what, I have been a ghost sister. I've stopped really caring if my sorority sisters, fraternity brothers know God. I haven't
Yeah.
even thought about that one time. Or if you're on the other side where you're like, I'm really not living different. What would be the way back towards
Yeah.
Jesus? What would be some of those things you would recommend?
Yeah. Great question. And I think Jesus does invite everyone to respond, in this story. The reality is that the Pharisees and the tax collectors are both sick. They're just sick in different ways, and so they have different invitations. And I think Jesus is inviting them into healing, but in different ways, and so for the people that would consider themselves, more assimilated, if you find yourself like I was, like living the work hard, play harder lifestyle, and the invitation is into Christ-like character. It's to do what Levi did. It's to leave the lifestyle. It's to start to ask the question, like, what does my faith have to say about not just what I do on Sunday morning, but how does it affect my, Monday through Saturday and how I live? And how does it affect the way I treat girls or guys? How does it affect my relationship with substances and my career and all that kind of stuff? I think it's asking the question of, how do I follow Jesus in all of these different ways? And so I would say, if you find yourself assimilated, it's the invitation into Christ-like character, into learning to live and be and think and do as Jesus would if he were living your life. For those who would find themselves maybe more like alienated, like, oh yeah, I'm the ghost brother or sister. Like I only show up to chapter mandated events, then I think Jesus's invitation is to compassion. It is to begin to see your brothers and sisters as God sees them. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Kristina, is just like you had the realization that like, oh, as much as I enjoy and love my sisters, Jesus loves them more. That gets me because I think that's the truth, is that he actually does. These people who seemingly care nothing about him, he cares so deeply about them. And he's inviting you to share his heart for them, to see them as he sees them, not just as like they've written God off and they've made their choices and you reap what you sow and whatever. I'm not going to be associated with that. But to see them as people who God has created in his own image, people that God would literally rather die than live without, because that's what Jesus did. And to start to love them in ways like he does. And that might practically, as you do that, might mean joining the party. That might actually mean showing up to a mixer, or a party. Not because the other Christian version of this is just like, oh yeah, I see them as people who need God, so I'm going to treat them as my like little projects, little Christian projects of like, I hope they come to Jesus. Don't see like your brothers and sisters as projects, see them as people. They're people to just love. And if that's all that happens and they never follow Jesus and all you do is love them and treat them as Jesus would, then that's a success. But that's part of the invitation, is to be in connection with them in relationship. So if you find yourself assimilated, I think it's the invitation to Christ-like character. If you find yourself alienated, I think it's the invitation to Christ-like compassion, and connection there. And I think there's a couple of different ways to initially respond.
Yeah, I think that's a great challenge. And if you're listening to this and you feel caught in the tensions that we've been mentioning, if following Jesus in your chapter feels messy or unclear, I think all of us can agree. We want you to hear you're not doing it wrong. The tension actually might be the sign that you're doing it right, that you're actually right where Jesus is. Just to sum it up, being Greek and Christian isn't about pulling away. It's not about blending in. It's about being present with Jesus in the real stuff, in the mess. And so the challenge for this week is, don't escape your world. Invite Jesus into it. Pay attention to the moment that you're in. Kind of reassess convictions, compromises, all that stuff. And we just want to invite you to stay with us on these next episodes. One of the reasons we wanted to do a whole series on being Greek and Christian is because it's not easy. And we also think it's not just a great idea that John and Sarah and I came up with. It's actually really, really biblical. Each episode is focused on a different scripture, a different narrative from Genesis to Revelation. And we want to just invite you to come on this journey so that at the end, you feel more biblically equipped, but you also feel like you're strengthened in what you're called to do in your sorority or fraternity.
That's good. Thanks, Kristina. Before we go for episode 1 of season 10, I thought that we could play a game. Are you guys up for that?
Okay. A game. Say less.
Okay, so we're
Okay.
going to play a game that is kind of called Kiss, Marry, Kill. That is like the more appropriate version of the
Okay.
game. So what is going to happen is I'm going to tell you guys 3 different Greek life events, and you're going to decide which one do you kiss, which one do you marry, which one do you kill. So kill is obviously like hate that, least favorite. Marry is like want to commit to that one for life, and kiss is like it's fine.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
I love how Kiss is like, it's casual. It's fine. It's like, it's not. I mean, does it mean more, a little more than that? No.
Okay, are you guys ready? Here
think so.
are your 3 categories you both have to pick. We have rush or recruitment, we have homecoming, and we have formal. Kiss, marry, kill, rush, homecoming, formal.
What year am I in school? Am I a pledge or am I a fraternity brother at this point?
Is this 2020 or 2001?
That's such a good
what is
question.
allowable?
That's a good question. For the purpose of the game, you are in the 2nd semester of your sophomore year.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
That
is
clarifies it.
specific. Okay. I will say, unpopular opinion, I loved recruitment. So I know that's probably some people want to put that on their kill list, but I think it's just the woo in me, you know? It's just, I was living my best life, meeting new people, talking about my story. I loved recruitment for the most part. Obviously, there's a dark side of recruitment that we don't like, but for the most part, that's a marry for me. I just love, yeah.
You're marrying recruitment?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
I think it's also because I was like an advisor for a long time and I got to see a way to shape it that I really was proud of. I think there's ways to do recruitment that are really dark and hard, but I loved recruitment done the right way.
Okay, we'll take it.
It might be a kiss, but I would say, marry. I loved it. I think it's part of the Greek system is that selection process. And I think formal for me, it depended, it depended on your date. It depended on the year. I think it's probably, I liked other events more, I would say. I'm a big like theme party person. Like that's going to be, I know that wasn't on your list.
What game is this, Kristina?
I know.
Hijacking my
put
game.
that out there. So I don't know. It's hard to kill any of these, but I don't know, John, what do you think before I finish?
Yeah. Well, if I am a 2nd semester sophomore, I would say that I would kill recruitment and rush. Contrary to
You
Kristina's contrary to popular opinion. I'm going with the crowd. I was not a fan of recruitment and rush, having the same conversation like 150 different times, of like, oh, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your major? And like,
I loved it. I loved it.
no, I have a short half-life for that. So, yeah, that would be the one that I kill. Maybe it's, formal is a marry. Those are like, formal for us was always like a different city somewhere that you would travel to. And
Oh, that's fun.
it's always a fun road trip. And, you get to dress up. It's like Great Gatsby style and good times, good memories and stuff like that. Homecoming. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I love football games. I mean, that was definitely a part of the culture. But homecoming didn't really change that much. Like any given Saturday was an awesome Saturday. Any home game was super fun. At Clemson, they do have some extra fanfare around homecoming that's fun, but that one was probably a kiss. I would have changed that, though, if you said I was a freshman or I was a pledge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
As a pledge, I would have said, it's mixed emotions. Homecoming was like our hell week. Shh, don't tell anyone. Yeah, so homecoming was it's like the best of times, the worst of times. It's like the best time you never want to have again, sort of deal. Like all of pledge season was kind of like that. If I'm a second semester sophomore, I would rank it kill recruitment, kiss homecoming, marry.
Okay, I'm going to go with, it's hard to believe that the Toreros wasn't a big homecoming draw. I know it's hard to believe. Now I work next to LSU, which, LSU homecoming is a whole nother beast. But I would have to say that's probably my kill. I also think for Greek women in particular, homecoming is like a job.
So no, it literally is a
It's
position,
like
homecoming chair.
And it's like always the most stressed out person in your chapter.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
it's
that's for
always
sure.
like,
The weight of the world
you're
on
like,
your
do you
shoulder.
like this job? They're like, yeah, I do. I'm twitching, but I like it. It's like, so I think that's got to go. The stress, if it was just a tailgate and a game, yes, but it isn't like that for sorority women. It is so many things. So that's got to go. And then, yeah, formal out kiss.
Well done. That was good, people.
What about you, Sarah?
Yeah.
What are you going to pick?
Do share.
Kristina, I know I had a huge reaction to you saying that you would marry recruitment, but I think I'm with you.
Oh,
Recruitment is
no,
like-
you can't take it back.
Recruitment is like extrovert crack and
Oh, it
also
is.
like the people pleaser's dream. Like you want me to go in front of other people and convince them that this is the best place that they can be? Of course I
Totally.
can do that. And like the outfits of it all are always so fun and the content, so many good Instagram pictures during
The
recruitment
songs?
and stuff
I know
like
a lot of
that.
people don't like the songs. I loved it.
No, I loved the songs. Pref ceremony. Yeah, I do. Compared to the rest of these, I actually am going to marry recruitment. So I'm sorry, Kristina, I
is
take that
wild.
back. I
That is
am
wild.
going
That's probably the
to-
difference between it's like two extroverts and an introvert.
I do
start a
think some
podcast.
women like loathe recruitment. I will say.
Yeah.
We're not speaking for all women. We're speaking for the extroverts, perhaps.
Yeah, that's true. We speak on behalf of all extrovert sorority women everywhere. Marry recruitment. I'm gonna kiss homecoming. I went to a school that doesn't have like a big sports presence, and so homecoming felt special. It was like something different. And it was like our moment of school spirit, and we had some really fun homecoming events. And I'm gonna kill formal because I don't think sorority formals are that fun. I think a fraternity formal is like a whole different experience because it's like normally a destination and stuff like that. But the amount of work that goes into a sorority, and I guess I always offices, so I was always kind of in charge of people at formals, but they're they're horrible. You go to like your kind of rundown country club and they feed you a meal.
It's like it's like a bee wedding.
They do
A
like
bee braid
superlatives that are
wedding.
like kind
Yeah.
of catty, and then you go to the bars. It's really just like a launching pad for everyone to go to bars and
Wow.
dresses.
Fair
So,
enough.
Totally.
would-
Sorry to all your formal dates. Just like I would kill you. Really do.
No, totally.
We do apologize on behalf of all the formal dates that we've ever had.
Yeah.
It wasn't
sure.
you. It wasn't about you that we put on the kill list.
Well, thank you guys for participating in that. Thank you for your opinions. I loved it. And that officially wraps episode 1 of the Greek and Christian podcast. So join us for episode 2, where we will dive deeper into the concept of being Greek and Christian. For more on being Greek and Christian, you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Greek and Christian. Or if you're wanting more to connect with one of us, you can also fill out our contact card listed in the show notes below. We'll see you back here next episode as we dive deeper into living out your faith in your fraternity or your sorority.
The Greek and Christian podcast is produced by Greek InterVarsity, a nonprofit college ministry for fraternity and sorority students. Our ultimate vision is to see every fraternity and sorority connected to a community of Greek Christians, so that every Greek is just one friend away from knowing and following Jesus. To learn more, find a community on campus, or partner with us, visit greek.intervarsity.org.